Hi there, welcome to episode 114, our second episode recorded at the Materialise conference. Our guest for the episode is no other than the CEO of Materialise, Brigitte de Vet-Veithen. It is a pleasure for me to be able to conduct this interview because Materialise is such a legendary company that has spent 35 years building the software and services infrastructure behind patient-specific implants, surgical planning, and point-of-care manufacturing. We also got to know Brigitte as a person and new leader for the company. Importantly, we covered the metrics that signal adoption, challenges to scale beyond the Halo case, and her vision for the industry. In my opinion, this is perhaps one of the most important conversations for the medical 3D printing industry in 2026. Enjoy. Please listen to the disclaimer at the end of this podcast.
Hello, Brigitte. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I think this is the third time we see each other in person.
Absolutely. And actually most of it this year.
Within a year.
Yeah. Within a year, yes.
The first time I saw you was I was a moderator on the side and you're the speaker.
Indeed.
And the second time you were an anonymous attendee, kind of accidentally dropped into my JP Morgan conference this year. And one of the most engaging audience I had.
I disclosed myself very quickly, I guess.
And then third time I'm sitting here in this beautiful studio that you set up for Materialise.
Yeah.
So really a pleasure to see you. And I also want to say that you're very accessible as a CEO of a public company. So thank you very much for having this conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a special event for us to have you here. While we also have our point of care farm here, 160 attendees, 200 people, including the speakers in total. To have you join us here for that event is a particular pleasure.
Yeah, yesterday I was in conference and the content was very educational to me. You know, at first I thought, okay, I probably know all the point of care applications possibly after 10 years in the space. But I still learned a ton, and also seeing how the industry is moving in certain directions now. And we certainly can touch upon that soon. But before that, I'd like just to reintroduce you a little bit. Maybe you can tell us your story, your journey. Very interesting pre-Materialise journey to where you are today, and then decades in Materialise, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did I end up here? That's a very good question. So really, before coming here, I'm going to be honest, I knew nothing about additive. I knew a lot about the healthcare space. So my journey really started in manufacturing in my very early days. I dealt with a lot of manufacturing companies in a lot of different sectors, amongst which also healthcare companies. And mainly my mission was to help them improve operationally. And after having done that for a while, I joined Johnson & Johnson to really make the step forward into healthcare at large. Stayed 10 years with them, relatively classical, commercially oriented career there, P&L responsibilities of countries, regions, and climbing up the ladder. And at some point, I felt it was time for a new chapter. Again, in the healthcare and particularly the medtech sector, I spent about 10 years helping companies that were either in trouble and had to go through turnarounds or had an aggressive growth plan and needed an extra pair of hands to do that. So I was CEO of some companies smaller than Materialise, but that gave me my first experience. Now, after those 10 years, I was looking for a challenge where I really had the feeling that I could leave a legacy and make a dent, leaving something meaningful behind.
Yeah.
I met Fried, the founder of Materialise, and from the first conversation onwards, it was clear that Materialise was going to be the place where I could create a legacy and leave a dent. And that's what I've done for the last 10 years.
Yeah. And now you're the CEO of the company.
Right. Yes. First 8 years with Materialise, I focused on, what I knew best, the medtech arena. So as you very well know, about half of our activities today are in healthcare. So our medical segment, 50% of our revenues. So I started 10 years ago building that medtech pillar that we have. At that point in time, I would say additive wasn't that much adopted yet. We were still very early stage. People knew about additive, but we really had to go through kind of the phase where we accelerated the adoption and really established that additive has value to add. So that was, an important phase. Now, obviously, we're in a very different phase, as you probably also have seen at the conference yesterday. The value of additive is very much accepted, and now it's all about scaling.
Yeah, as you know, 3D Heals exclusively focus on healthcare. So in addition to medtech, we also focus on biotech and a bunch of like 3D printed drugs and stuff like that. So it's really all over all the verticals. In terms of, intuitively, whether or not additive is now into our space, I can say, my family members now are getting knee surgeries that is partly 3D printed. That I can feel intuitively, but from your end, you obviously know the data. Do you have some concrete metrics that you're monitoring to see the penetration of different verticals right now?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And admittedly, in the different verticals, the penetration is at a very different level. I think a metric that indicates to all of us very clearly that the adoption is there, or the clearest metric, I should say, that we can find is if we start seeing reimbursement for some of the additive applications. And actually, if we do look at some of the applications, there is reimbursement, not in all countries and regions yet, but we do have countries where reimbursement is accepted. Just to take an example, our patient-specific hip implant in Belgium, the country that we are in today, there's structural reimbursement, and there has been structural reimbursement for the hip implant for a number of years. Why? Because we've been able to demonstrate that using the patient-specific Materialise implant, re-interventions can be avoided. And with that, healthcare costs can be reduced. And that convinced the payers to actually structurally reimburse the patient-specific hip implants. And that's, I think, a very clear metric. Now, obviously, it's a long journey to get to that point. So there's other metrics that we focus on before that. But when you look at the number of patients treated in a certain application and indication, that gives us an early indicator as to what progress we are making. And then comparing that to the total potential of patients, obviously gives you an impression of the penetration achieved.
Yeah, I've been attending many 3D printing for medicine conferences, and I think there is also evolution of the maturity of conversation in the space. Because, the earlier conferences typically focus on amazing things we could do, applications. And now we start to talk about more practical aspects.
Yes.
Things like reimbursement has been echoing in my ear in the last couple of years
Absolutely.
now. Like every time I have a conversation. Now, do you now as the leader of the company kind of approach this problem differently now of a reverse engineer to say, which one is more likely to be reimbursed first, then we'll go to that vertical?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I agree with you that the maturity around these conversations has very much changed. We're not talking about the halo cases only anymore. Yes, our solutions have a great value for the very complex cases, but it's not only those cases anymore. It's primary surgeries that benefit from additive and 3D technology at large. So the conversation around this has certainly changed. 10 years ago, we were still at the halo cases. Now that we are at a much larger adoption, selecting a new application always comes with the question on what is the willingness to pay? Are we going to be able to convince payers? Are we going to be able to make a health economics case, hence also drive reimbursement or funding in any other way by the hospitals, as an example, because it saves costs in the hospitals. So that is a critical question that we always ask ourselves at the very start of a project or approaching a new indication. Now, is that the only criteria? Absolutely not. There's many other criteria we also take into account, but that's a very important one. Now, while this is a very important criteria, and while we also see, as I said, already structural reimbursement, getting reimbursement and collecting the evidence for patient-specific implants, instrumentation, or other approaches is not that easy. Because per definition, every patient is different. So your control group for trials that you want to set up is much harder to define. So that's the whole complexity where We have gained a lot of experience, but there's still a lot of education to be done in the market with all kind of stakeholders to understand how to practically do this.
Yeah. You mentioned economics. Reimbursement certainly is one part of that. And recently, when I was talking to some Pitch 3D startups, founders started to mention incentives behind physicians to deliver these patient-specific devices. And not just about money, but obviously the outcome of the patient recovery, complication rates.
Yeah.
It is almost a very intricate dance to figure out what part can this new device fit into the workflow of existing practice. How do you approach that problem in terms of the delivery of these new devices?
So I think we need to keep in mind with the type of devices, and when we talk about patient-specific devices and approaches in particular, implementing these requires a change in approach, requires a different mindset.
Yeah.
It's too easy to think that, yes, we have the technology and we figured out how to make a patient-specific implant and it'll go and it'll be used because it makes so much sense. There's a whole mindset shift for physicians to make because suddenly they need to preoperatively plan, something that they might not have done before. So it changes their routine. They have a lot more information at hand. They also need to take that into account at different moments in the patient journey. Again, changes their routine. So a lot of our efforts are focused on, we call it, almost educational efforts, awareness creation, but also helping to shift that mindset. People will change their approach if it's worth it, but we need to demonstrate why it's worth it and then be very close to our physicians to help them go through that change, which I think as companies we're all used to going through changes and adopting, so we can apply that and use that to help our customers change.
Yeah, speaking of change, I have to say both of us as a company, 3D Heals and Materialise, have evolved over time.
Yes.
Because, we started off only focusing on 3D printing because that's what I knew. And still, to this day, believe it can change the world. But we have now adding in the 3D technologies component to it, which means there's a huge amount of digital world that we haven't covered that can really evolve the industry. And similarly, yesterday I was joking that Materialise probably borrowed from us that you also now becoming more digital in terms of the focus of the pre-surgical planning part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not a new thing. And I would want to mention two shifts that we're making. One is indeed, it's not only about implants and instrumentation. It's also, I keep mentioning 3D approaches. So pre-surgical planning is a really important element of that. We don't always have to go through a printing step.
Right.
Just using personalized planning preoperatively and intraoperatively can make a huge difference as well. So that is certainly one shift that we are going through. The second shift that we've gone through at Materialise for the last 10 years in the medical arena, and now also as a broader Materialise company, we're not a 3D printing company anymore. Our customers don't see us as a 3D printing or 3D technology company anymore. They see us as a person bringing, or a partner to bring hip solutions, shoulder solutions, craniomaxillofacial solutions, structural heart solutions, but they don't care whether, we 3D print.
Right.
The technology doesn't really matter for them. They need the right solution for their patient. So we are a medical company. We are an aerospace company in our industrial areas. So we're not a 3D printing company. And I say that jokingly because, of course, we use 3D printing in a lot of things that we do. And, of course, we use 3D modeling in everything that we do. But we're not a classical 3D printing company. So that's the second shift that we are going through.
Yeah.
Now, on the 3D technologies, I would argue that we'll see a third shift that we're going through, where today we're looking primarily at anatomical landmarks to pre-surgically plan. We're looking at the data or the medical image of the patient. And what we're moving to is something that is a lot more predictive and even more personalized. In 5 or 10 years' time, I would hope that as a community, as a company, we are able to take into account not only the CT images of the patient, but maybe why not the data that comes from my Apple Watch? why not the data that comes from my Whoop device to understand what my lifestyle is, what my needs are, hence define the best approach to who I am as a patient. So go even one step further in the planning, become predictive and even more personalized.
Absolutely. I mean, I have always also kind of joked, but not really a joke, is you do not want your surgeon to open you up and say, oops.
Oh, right. What do
Or
I
this
find
is
there?
interesting.
Exactly.
This is not good. If
Yes.
it's interesting, that's not good. You want to know ahead of the time and predict what's going to happen intraoperatively.
At least I, as a patient, would want to know. Absolutely.
Yeah. I also want to mention that you're the first person I know who wear both wearables, a Whoop and Apple Watch.
I'm a bit crazy.
Time.
I agree.
Yeah. So, the last year we organized a webinar focusing on 3D printing or 3D technologies in orthopedics. And I was doing extensive research at the time and realized how well penetrated 3D printing itself is already in all the major device makers. Yeah. But simultaneously, I also realized people are no longer printing the surgical guides as much as they used to.
Yes.
Because they now have this $1 million robot attached to every single system. And so I was having a slight existential crisis, I would say.
Don't worry, Jenny. There'll be a role.
It seems like Materialise is taking care of that. So you guys are actually working with all these device makers as well, as well as Da Vinci, the intuitive surgical company that I saw yesterday. I was very pleased to see that because I know that people are no longer, keeping the status quo and willing to move forward to the next generation of medical care. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
So everybody thought when the robots came on board that the surgical guides would disappear.
Yeah.
The reality today is that hasn't happened.
Okay.
And why is that? I think there's two reasons why that is. The first one is not everybody can afford a $1 million robot. Even a $500,000 robot. Not everybody will be able to afford that.
Yeah.
And guides are more practical, more affordable, an accessible solution for that. So that's one. The second is what we see, take the US as an example. What we see in the US that the healthcare system is shifting towards more ambulatory care. So the whole, certainly in orthopedics, the percentage of patients that is treated in the ASCs, so the ambulatory care centers, is a lot larger these days. Now, ASCs, again, they're focused on many different aspects, but not only making the surgery as such more efficient, but also making the whole chain more efficient. Now, if you preoperatively plan because you want to use a guide, you optimize your inventory in the ASCs.
Yeah.
That saves a lot of working capital, as an example. It makes the chain faster. And again, you don't have to invest in a robot. So I fundamentally believe that the robots will coexist with other technologies, such as the guides, with AR, which will increasingly play a role in the market as well. So there will be different needs and different segments in the market that will need some of these solutions. It's not one or the other.
Yeah.
There's a place for all of the technologies.
Yeah. A variety of combination and offerings.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have a surgical guide than not to have a surgical guide, is my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it really depends on the indication as well. Some of the orthopedic applications are going to be much harder to treat with robots just because of the variety of anatomies of disease states that you can encounter. So the robot is not going to fit all cases either. So again, technologies will coexist.
Well, since we're on the topic of robot, what comes next, which is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I profess I'm not an expert in this, but there's so many ways that we can talk about this topic. I mean, most importantly, as a software company, part of your offering is a SaaS. And at least in the United States, we're experiencing a software downturn because of the fear of AI. And recently I was in a meeting with room of VCs who, supposed to be advocate for AI, but actually a lot of people have no idea what's going to happen next.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of nervousness around.
Yes.
I'm actually surprised that it took you almost 15 minutes to get to the topic of AI. But here we are. So let me give you my take on AI. I know there's a lot of nervousness. And a lot of people also fear that AI is going to take their jobs away.
Yes, actually, the VCs were actually afraid of their job going to be taken away.
I have a very different view on that.
Okay.
Is AI going to help us automate and make manual work, easier? Absolutely. And does that mean that jobs will change? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But AI is there to enhance what humans will do.
Yeah.
AI will help us to make the shift towards even more value add activities. And we'll be able to serve our customers even better.
Mhm.
And AI will help us create new solutions that weren't possible before. Give you one example in the medical field as to how we have leveraged AI for years. Admittedly, not large language models, because that's more something of the last couple of years.
Right.
But even 10 years ago, we started using AI, machine learning, collecting data, and now using that to, as I said, make some of the manual steps easier. That has made that our lead times, so the time between a surgeon sending us the images and us shipping out the patient-specific device, used to be 5 or 6 weeks.
Mhm.
We can do that now in a couple of days. A
Wow.
patient that comes into the hospital on Monday morning, or the surgeon typically finds the patient in the hospital bed because of some accident, for example, during the weekend. Surgeon looks at the patient, has the images taken on Monday. We get the images on the same day. The patient is treated on the Thursday, kept for one more night, and on Friday night, before the next weekend, the patient is sent home. All of that is possible, amongst others, because we have leveraged AI
Mhm.
to accelerate the process. And that makes it now trauma patients can benefit from these
Right.
great solutions.
Yeah.
That wasn't possible when we had lead times of 5 or 6 weeks. I mean,
Yes.
you don't keep a trauma patient in a bed for that long.
Right.
Not being able, I mean, if it's a facial trauma, not being able to eat or, sometimes even breathe.
Yeah.
So that has changed the type of offerings that we could bring. So AI enhances what we humans do, but it doesn't take jobs away. It changes the jobs dramatically.
Yeah, that's a really good example in terms of obviously that's an internal service. You're providing a service for
Yes.
that. That's an
Yes.
internal
Yes.
operational optimization that really is
Yes.
dramatic change. Now, for external users of Materialise software, do you have any offering too for these people?
Well, so that's where I think the strength and the power of Materialise and our business model comes along, because we've built these AI algorithms for our own services. What we typically do with those, and what we've done in this specific case, is we also build these algorithms in our software so that we enable customers to be able to do exactly the same. So very often in our model, we learn what our customers need because we are doing it ourselves. We build the solutions and then build that into our software as well. So if you look at our software today, there's a whole range of AI algorithms that are embedded in the software and that every user can have access to.
Mhm.
And the second is that we obviously, in the last couple of years, we made it possible for users to use their own data libraries, apply AI to it, and then integrate it into the software so that they can benefit from their data, their specific data, and use the power of AI around that as well to accelerate their own processes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's what we need to do to make the adoption, to accelerate the adoption of personalized cases.
Mhm.
And as you very well know, our vision and mission is to bring personalization to as many patients as we can.
Yeah.
Starting from the halo cases and the complex cases 10 years ago, we are on a journey of mass personalization, bringing it to everybody. And so doing it in our own services to enable more patients to have access, the example of the trauma patients, but also doing that in our software so that our customers can create new offerings as well, deliver faster offerings, and with that address more patients is equally important.
This is a good segue to now talk about vision.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of really complex, difficult cases. It's almost typical for a 3D printing conference, to have conjoined twin separation as one of the topics.
Yeah, of course.
But we don't
They
have a
to be
lot of
there.
those. And yesterday I saw a variety of cases that could be more scalable. So what is your idea of this mass personalization, let's say a short-term 3 to 5 years vision?
Yeah.
And then how does that expand in 10 years, which, I think is basically a ballpark number of very far future.
Yeah. So I'm a fundamental believer of that adoption increasing in the medical scene. Not every case needs a personalized device or implant.
Mm-hmm.
Not every case needs a personalized 3D printed instrumentation kit. But every case should be approached with at least 3D technology, 3D modeling, hence preoperatively or pre-interventional planning, because that allows a surgeon or a physician to have a much better view on what the issue is and gain speed in the OR as well, which saves time, cost, etc. So I'm a fundamental believer, and I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see adoption further increase there where we already have established the value. Think about the orthopedic applications that we talked about in the cranial-maxillofacial applications. So I think we'll see the adoption increase in those segments. And then we'll have new segments or new applications that we'll see born. There's a lot of work in the pediatric field at this point in time. You might know about our tracheal splint program.
Yes.
So where we 3D print a bioresorbable splint for babies that get born with a disease called TBM, where the trachea collapses. And then after 2 years, essentially the problem resolves, or the disease goes away. And with that, our splint also goes away. So we'll see some of these applications, new fields in the respiratory field at large. But we'll also see progress on the cardiovascular side in other soft tissue areas. And yesterday at the conference, I think you saw plenty of examples in the soft tissue arena where we're only scratching the surface today. So next to growing the adoption in those markets or segments where the value of additive and 3D technologies is largely established, we'll also see new fields where the value will become clearer, and where I think in 3 or 5 years we might be at the stage that we are now in orthopedics or in CMF.
And you mentioned personalized medicine. I think I remember I was joking. I mean, I wish. I mean, we should get personalized medicine. Every patient should. But the truth is, the doctors don't have the time to give you the amount of attention that you deserve to create this personalized case.
And that's where, technology can help them.
Right.
Because technology is the enabler of time saving for doctors. Information will be available in an easier way, in a faster way. More information will be easy. It doesn't cost them time. It just changes the way they work. They will spend less time, but still some time before the operation, rather than in the OR, figuring out, as you said, opening up the patient and saying, oops, what do I find here?
Yes.
So in total, it's less time spent, but it's spent differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're one of the busiest CEO I see because you travel so much and yet always look so refreshed. We are equally jet lagged. You just look better than me.
Not sure about that. I'm trying.
You go to many different markets.
I do.
And you have to understand all the different healthcare systems. How are the conversations differ among these different markets all over the world for you?
Well, there's huge differences between geographies, and they cannot all be compared. Now, again, I think that's the beauty of additive or 3D technology, because it's very easy to adapt to local needs. The flexibility is inherent to the technology. So, what are some of the key differences that I see? I would take the US and Europe in one bucket and essentially categorize them as more advanced in the adoption of 3D technologies at large.
Yeah.
That's driven by, I would think, not only the market dynamics, but also driven by us companies having taken more focus in those regions and having spent more time and effort in those regions. Whereas you see some other countries where there's literally no adoption yet. Even large geographies, Africa.
I was thinking about that.
Absolutely. Latin America, still a very uncovered territory. Some countries in Asia, not all of them, because some of them are very advanced as well.
Yeah.
So you see, very different dynamics in those two regions. Now, are we at the end of the journey yet in the US and Europe and the adoption? Absolutely not. That's going to increase. Are we going to see adoption very soon in the African markets or some of the Latin American markets? Not in all of them. It's going to be a step-by-step approach because honestly, 3D technologies at large only make sense when there's good imaging available.
Right.
Without imaging, 3D technologies can't really do a lot. So we're going to follow the imaging technologies. As soon as imaging technologies are established, take the African markets as an example, it makes a lot of sense for us to follow.
As a radiologist, I couldn't agree more.
All right, of course,
The
you
importance of
understand that.
imaging.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
it all starts there.
Yeah, speaking of the imaging, yesterday when I was at the conference, they were talking about pediatric cardiology.
Yes.
That space has significantly advanced because the advancement of echo and MRI and the imaging resolution has improved significantly.
Absolutely. And I would actually say that in the congenital heart space, the adoption of 3D technologies is huge.
Yeah.
Just because the variety of cases you see there, very often physicians lack the right solutions to treat these babies. It's not only babies, so these young kids
right.
as well. So the adoption is relatively high there, and still there's a need to bring even more solutions to that space. And we can learn from that for other segments, because with the lack of solutions that the congenital space had, they didn't have a choice. They had to adopt and now see the benefit. We can learn from that for other spaces.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears just slightly because you were at the JP Morgan conference. I wasn't sure why you were there. Just kidding. But you have a history of investing as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And you're not kidding about the JP Morgan conference, because I get that question a lot, to be honest. Why were you at the JP Morgan conference? The main reason why I get that question is because people don't see us as a medical company yet.
Right.
When you look at Materialise, you think, well, additive, 3D printing, industrial areas, some type of technology. But no, we are a medical company for everything we do in medical. So half of us is a medical company. So yes, JP Morgan, which is a conference that brings together healthcare investors, is absolutely a relevant place for me to be. Now, yes, indeed, I was there, with multiple purposes. One of them is as an investor. As you might know, we have a relatively aggressive and deliberate M&A strategy.
Yeah.
Our balance sheet is very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
We have the means to deploy some of that capital wisely. And we are on track to do so. So JP Morgan was an excellent place to meet some of the companies, startups, scale-ups, to have conversations as to whether there's a benefit of joining forces, etc. And again, JP Morgan is a great place to do that. There's other conferences that are, great place to do that as well. And you'll see me traveling even more this year because, I'll be attending those as well.
So what are your strategies of for this side of the things, the future acquisition or investment? How do you, you actually obviously invest in the communities. For example, I've seen some students benefiting from this conference.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as this conference, you've seen one of the, side of the investment that we do on educating people, creating awareness in the market, enhancing the adoption by inspiring about different applications.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one type of investment that we do. Investing into the data collection and collecting the evidence to push forward reimbursement.
Mm-hmm.
And funding from different sources is another type of investment that we do. Obviously, the third range of investment is in our organic capabilities in our R&D. We invest heavily in that. And it's one of the things I think where we differentiate from a lot of other companies in the space is that, when markets are a little softer, which happens to all of us,
right?
That markets are a little softer. The one thing that we always keep and maintain is the investments in our R&D, because we fundamentally believe that that's our role and that's one of the big drivers to fulfill our mission to create a better and healthier world, to maintain that investment because there's still a lot to be done. before we have, achieved the dream of mass personalization specifically for the healthcare field. So that is an investment that we maintain. And now we're adding, since I came in as the CEO, we're adding a deliberate M&A investment as well. We acquired a company a big year ago, 1.5 years ago, in the cardiac space, cardiac simulation technologies, a company called FIOPS. So that was one example of the type of acquisitions that we certainly plan to continue to do.
That makes a lot of sense. There's some similarity in that acquisition. That is finite element analysis of the cardiology side.
Yes, in particular the structural heart side. So all the cardiac valves or heart valves for replacement, repair situations. And it was a very neat complementary technology to what we already had in terms of the planning technologies for the structural heart space, where we focused on pure anatomical landmarks. FIOPS brings the simulation technology to also enhance the type of planning we can bring to physicians.
As you know, we have an audience that's filled with entrepreneurs and people right now are probably pricking up right now, hearing a Materialise is willing to invest or acquire. But we have a global portfolio.
Yes.
Do you typically look at the European startups mostly, or how do you scope out?
Absolutely not. So, I mean, we are present as a company in 21 countries, 28 locations, and we cover the globe. That literally goes from Japan to the US and Latin America. The only continent that we're not present in is Africa. And that's also kind of the geographical scope in which we look for acquisitions, partnerships, etc. We don't have a preference for a particular region. Absolutely not. We look at the technology, the people, and obviously the value add of the technology, and to what extent an unmet medical need is met with the technology, and whether there is going to be a willingness to pay by somebody.
Are you guys in Mongolia by any chance?
We are not in Mongolia.
Okay,
no.
I got one for you.
All right. Okay. Let's talk.
Well, I think we're approaching the end of this interview. As I know you have a couple lined up here. But I want to just get to know you as a person even more.
Right.
So,
next to my two crazy devices.
Yeah, I think I've heard more last night. There are some other interesting aspects of your life. So what do you do to recharge outside of work?
Well, a lot, as you can imagine. Well, first of all, I have 3 children that are all over the place. My eldest daughter is in Boston doing a PhD there. I have a son in California. And my youngest daughter is actually she's moving up to Gothenburg now. So I'm taking her to Gothenburg tonight. So they're spread all over the place.
Good locations, though.
Great locations. They didn't make it hard for me to visit a lot. And obviously that's part of what I do, what me and my husband do. We try to see them as much as we can, as whenever we can build it into our busy schedules. But then, as you can figure, I'm a health freak. Probably also what attracted me to the healthcare field initially. I run, I meditate, I do yoga, I golf. When the weather is nice, I'm a good weather golfer.
I think you're missing something.
So what do I miss?
You swim in the winter.
I do, actually. I'm impressed you know that. I swim in the winter because cold water shocks are good for you. And
I can't even imagine that. I can't even take a cold shower. So I'm just imagining that right now.
It's been proven that is a really important factor for longevity. So I can recommend it.
That's why you always look so good. Now, if you're so busy, how do you keep yourself up to date?
Well, the digital world these days makes sure that we are very up to date in an easy way.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, my children being in so different places of the world, they feed me with a lot of information and learnings.
Yeah.
Always interesting to talk to them. So it's inspiring in itself. And then I have a great bunch of people around me here. It's a luxury to work with. The people that we have at Materialise, and they have their hands in a lot of things and keep me abreast on those as well.
And not to mention, Materialise also has a podcast. And
Absolutely.
and also
Yes.
you're a constant listener to the Lattice podcast as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely. Big fan of that. And really glad that you're doing that. It's important that we get the word out, that we, share examples of what works and what doesn't work. And you're doing a fantastic job at building that community around this, so that people can also, have a network to reach out to in case they need to.
I certainly appreciate your support. Now, if a young student, especially if as a female student, wants you to give some advice for her career, future, next generational entrepreneur, what would you tell her or him?
Probably a couple of things. First is dare to be bold. It's the sky is the limit. And you shouldn't start limiting yourselves by your own limiting beliefs. So be bold. That's the first one. And the second is put yourselves in the shoe of your customers. Always keep your customer in mind. Talk the language of the customer. Try to really embed yourselves in his or her environment and understand what the struggles are and what could change their lives. So that we focus on the customer needs, the clinical needs, and in particular, in our space, the medical unmet needs that you see.
And if you have one thing to tell us what you're going to be super excited about in 10 years for 3D printing or 3D technologies in medicine, what would you say that was?
Structural reimbursement.
Okay.
That would make
practical.
me happy.
Very practical.
Absolutely.
I love to hear that. Thank you so much, Brigitte. I hope this is one of many interviews we could do in the future.
I'd love to.
Thank you for inviting me here today.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks for taking the time.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views expressed do not constitute medical or financial advice. The technologies and procedures discussed may not be commercially available or suitable for every case. Always consult with a licensed professional.